Hello, welcome to Philosophy Roulette. This is number 200, where I read and review philosophy papers live on air. So let's see what we got today. I was doing some continental philosophy by request. You can always request I read something, and I may or may not do it. I try to actually get to requests. I did actually have some authors send me stuff. I'm going to probably take a look at that over the next few days, which is nice, because all the people I send out emails to the Christian bioethics to all the authors, just to inform them that I did the review. I mean, I don't expect them to care, but most of the time they're usually happy to take a look, and some people like it, and I ask them, hey, anything else to read? So, contemporary political theory. I skip the ones above because they're harder to read. I mean, complexity often has a lot of math because it's complexity. And then, what's it called? And same with cognition. Cognition can be a little sciencey. Sometimes it's not. I probably should go look at the journal. Let's see. Society of Psychological Anthropology. So, this is probably a little, yes, he is not exactly super philosophy, but sometimes I look at those other things. Yes, he risks of schooling. Yeah. HTS Theological Studies. Adzan Pitu, Syncretism or Religious Tradition, Research in Sankipta Rasa Cirebon Mosque. Okay. Ooh, Husserl. I like Husserl. International Journal for the Semiotics of Law. Alright, so metaphorical use of algorithm in legal reasoning. Had a bunch of stuff on this. Let's just see what we have. Here, Christian bioethics. Let's see what's forthcoming from Christian bioethics. They don't have page numbers on this. Alright, so let's see real quick. Maybe I'll just look at something from 2020. Do these have page numbers? They do. So Christian bioethic, immanent goals or transcendental orientation. Interesting. Let's see what else we got. And then this one here. Christian integrity regained. Reformational worldview engagement for everyday medical practice. Interesting. So we've got Christian, bioethics. Shocking. That's what the topic is. Let's just go see if something like this, because I haven't done any straight up religiously based philosophy, but it's not available. So what are you gonna do? Because I have no complaint reading a Christian bioethics paper. It might be super interesting for all I know. Oxford. Oh, is this available? Looks like it's open access. Cool beans. So let's just see how long. So it's 10 pages. Let's grab it. Yeah, let's take a quick look. Maybe it'll be fun. Okay, and let's see what else we have available. Contemporary political theory. See what's forthcoming from these folks. Alright. Review. Wow, they've got a bunch of theft is property, dispossession, and critical theory. Interesting. 4 pages. Let's see what that could be. I don't know if I completely trust this page numbers though. 1 to 4. What is 1 to 4? Are they really this short? Maybe that's just some sort of placeholder. I don't know. Download PDF. Alright, let's just take a quick look. Oh, it's a review, that's why. Forget it. Robert Nichols, Duke University Press. Okay, so all of these are probably reviews. That's why they're all exactly the same length. Yeah. Alright, so I'm not going to look at this right now. My search is a little busted because that's what shows me, the short papers. But, like, it says there's 1,000 matches, so that means there's a bunch of these things, and I'm not going to be able to tell which is which. Alright, so this might be one, because it's not the... Yes, it's 1 to 3. I have to get something that's more than 4 pages here, else it's swamping my little search function. Yeah, I can't tell. Alright, so I'm probably going to stick to the Christian bioethics paper, because that might be fun. Misunderstanding Metaethics. Interesting. 6 to 21, 15 pages, and it's got 168 stuff. So that might be kind of cool to read. It's probably there if it's got 168 downloads. Little lesson to everyone out there. If you want people to read your stuff, make it available. Let's take a look. See that? Right there. Let's see what else we've got from Diametros. I don't know if I know this this journal. I think I've clicked on it before, but oh, look at this interesting stuff. Is epistemic safety threatened by Frankfurt cases? I feel like I might have even read something like this. Frankfurt type cases, epistemic safety. Not sure, but okay. I'm still sticking to the Christian bioethics because I haven't read that before. Let's see. The objects of phenomenology. That is a very, very Husserlian question. Let's see. What do we got forthcoming? It was mapping the imagination. Modality matters. Imagination as consciousness possibilities in Husserl transcendental. You know, I should read some of this stuff. Radical immanent critique. Mapping the imagination. Distinct acts, objects, and modalities. This could be a lot of fun to read. Bunch of reasonably length papers too. 1 to 9. Look at that. 1 to 7 as a review. Let's just see what this one looks like for my own sort of curiosity. Nah, not available though. Arguably, the two most important transformations establish a genuine Husserlian approach to the imagination. First lies in the grasping of it and whatever. Hey, DeMarshall, what's up? I'm okay. I hope you're well and happy too. So, what do I got? I got a few things here to take a look at, but I'm thinking I'm just going to stick with this one because, you know what? I have not done any Christian bioethics, or I haven't done any sort of I haven't done any Christian-based philosophy in a long time. I did one a very long time ago. And even that one was not like explicitly Christian. It was just like Christian aligned sort of. So I'm gonna do this just because it seems to be a bit different from oh wait, is this a oh, this is a, what's it called? This is a shucks. This is a introductory article on the journal, like this issue of this. Oh shoot, this is an editorial. All right. Oh man, I was all excited to read that paper. What was the other one then that was available here? I hope this is available. Dagnabbit, I got all excited for a sec. I was like, I get to read something different and new. Yeah, DeMarshall, I'm gonna read one more Deleuze. I have it saved, but I want to just do something different. So you'll be getting some more Deleuze in soon. Is this available? Not available. Okay, so we're not doing Christian bioethics, although that sounded like a lot of fun. Dagnabbit. Alright, so what else did I have available? This one here is Misunderstanding Metaethics, Difficulties Measuring Folk Objectivism and Relativism. 15 pages, a little stressful for me. Mapping, oh, this is just because I wanted to read this, but it's not available. And what's this one? Oh, Metaphorical Use of Algorithm and Legal Reasoning. Is this available? That might be a lot of fun too. I mean, fun for me. I don't know how fun it is for other people. Download PDF. Open access. Save file. So. Let's actually see if how long it is, because I don't always trust these I've been fooled before. Okay, 11 pages. It actually is. Is it like terrible to read? No, it looks okay at the moment. Okay. So we're gonna read Metaphorical Use of Algorithm in Legal Reasoning, and there, it actually worked. So I hope so, DeMarshall, I hope so. There's the link in the chat for anyone who so wishes to click on it, and if you come later and the link's not there, you can always type !paper and it will pop back up. So yeah, what was the, okay, yeah, Nothing important. Law as humanities. Oh, oh man, that stinks. The first word in the paper is a typo. Shucks. Will our next lawyer be a machine? I think that if he were a robot, everything would change. On the contrary, the lawyer is the Homo sapiens sapiens. He will still have to deal with rhetoric, interpretation, humanistic disciplines, and the classical epistemological problems of law. I conceive the humanistic disciplines in a way as a necessary foothold for reason and for legal reason as well, without this having to involve any irrationalism. Therefore, the very first question of method that arises is openly anti-Cartesian. The method used here for approaching law is based on an idea of law as humanities and not simply as law and humanities. As far as law and humanities approach is concerned, I would only note that there is already an extensive literature on the subject, to which I simply refer to 1721, 29, 30, and 33, as there would be no reason to dwell on it. Heretier's idea, and I apologize for how I say names in all foreign words, and not just his, is that the so-called humanities are an integral part of the legal discourse. According to this approach, if the sapiens facing law has to deal with the humanities, he has to deal with the humanities also while facing algorithms, unless he starts to imitate the machine and become another kind of interpreter. As a consequence, the jurist needs to use humanities facing the strict connection between law and algorithms. The sapiens, in other words, will have to deal with humanistic disciplines unless he starts a different interpretation, just as machines will eventually produce another art thanks to machine learning. As Gabriel Marino pointed out in the IRSL roundtable, what is the IRSL? That is number 3. That's the International Roundtable for Semiotics of Law. Okay. Machines are already able to replicate human art. Once we have established that human beings' problem is to still understand any forms of expression different from their own, if it can be argued that the machines express themselves, the relationship between art and machines seems in fact to imply an ontological problem. Do machines conceive autonomous art? And an epistemological one. How does man understand said art? Oh yeah, if anyone's out there watching, please feel free to ask questions along the way. I'm just reading this the first time too, so we're going to see what happens. Because human beings' approach to these problems is always the same, in my perspective the old sapiens, that is a rather arrogant name, will continue to be himself and will face algorithms, big data, and so on in his specific human, all-too-human way. Cultural machines. And you must admit that algorithms, which we made and continue to make, are located in cultural machines. The algorithm has its roots not only in mathematical logic, but in the philosophical traditions of cybernetics, consciousness, and the magic of symbolic language. To understand the algorithm, we need to uncover those roots and then build a new model of algorithmic reading that incorporates a deep understanding of abstraction and process. The algorithm deploys concepts from the idealized space of computation in messy reality, implementing them in what I call culture machines, complex assemblages of abstractions, processes, and people. What's kind of interesting about this is being on Twitch like a few months ago, and it's still very big. Chess just sort of blew up. It became a huge sort of internet phenomenon. And the recent history of chess is very sort of interesting in terms of the algorithm in chess has recently, in the last 20 years, overtaken all human players. So, if you have a powerful enough computer, there is no human that will beat you at chess. But what's happened is, and what's kind of interesting, is that the human players have learned from the machines, and then the people who design the algorithms in chess, they then have to readapt to what the human players now have adapted to. And so even though the machines will always win, they're still learning from each other. So I feel like the chess community would have a lot to say about this sort of interaction between how people and machines, how they read off what the machines are doing, and then how the machine algorithms are then adapted to deal with how the people have reacted. Yeah, so go ask some chess streamers about this. Continuing. I would add that maybe the old sapiens is always present in cultural machines in the same way he is in mythological machines, the concept introduced by Furio Jesse. We do not talk about myth from an external point of view, since we are are always caught inside or in a mythological machine. This thesis implies a theoretical claim according to which every philosophy should also be a not a mythology, a mythophily. There is a phenomenological and anthropological point related to this epistemological issue, according to which everyone lives in a mythical way. And moreover, to everyone is given a chance to try and report this experience of myth. This appears to be a significant aspect, at least from an anthropological philosophical point of view, and it becomes a question of method in the debate on algorithms. If I had to express myself with a paradox, I would say that the sapiens live in a sort of original state of culture because the cultural machine has always existed. In this unachievable state of culture, the metaphor is eventually the heart of a possible theoretical conceptualism in the meaning given by Blumenberg, who calls absolute metaphor the one which resists any attempt to be reduced to concept. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know if this is so paradoxical. I mean, yes, we are in the grips of culture. I mean, you can say we are cultural things as humans. And then to call it a cultural machine, I'm not sure what else is being added there by calling it a machine. Is this just like a causal mechanism that's now being added? Like the culture itself is sort of doing stuff? That's not a crazy new idea. That's just some sort of teleological concept. So I don't see exactly what the what's so paradoxical about that. Yeah, I mean, that's what seems like it's happening. Like you're adding some sort of determination to culture, but there's nothing like particularly I don't think that's a particularly new idea. I mean, it's actually a very old idea. So, alright, continuing. I could say that in some way the Hobbesian state of nature is original, but the state of culture is original as well, in a situation beyond nature and culture. In any case, this argument would involve dealing with a very complicated philosophical question. The issue of the limits of rationalism should be addressed, and this is not the place to deal with this topic. Okay. Metaphors and algorithms. Facing this complex question, it is at least possible to affirm that there is an epistemological difficulty in defining the cultural machine and the mythological machine, because everyone is inside them. Sure, there's always I agree with that. In a sense, we may always have the great humanistic problem of choosing the right metaphor, and the underlying epistemological question sounds like this. Which came first, the concept or the metaphor? Before continuing with the reasoning, it is useful to quote Finn once again. When technologists, researchers, and entrepreneurs speak about computational culture today, this deep myth of the algorithm is typically obscured by layers of rationalizing rhetoric and the procedural metaphors of software design. Indeed, the most prevalent set of metaphors seems to be that of code as structure, platforms, architecture, objects, portals, gateways. So staying in our mythological or cultural machines, we deal with metaphors to understand algorithms, just as in the field of economics we need rhetoric, metaphors, and so on to understand the concepts according to the economist Deirdre McCloskey. We could argue that if the economist needs rhetoric using graphs, abscissas, ordinates, and other signs, the contemporary academician needs rhetoric too, because he uses slides and so on. Yeah, there's always a technology, basically, and like the metaphor is part of the technology here. Like our technological base is like part and parcel of whatever sort of discipline you're in. So if you're in economics, you need the tools of that, which includes metaphors that you use, and same with all the other stuff. So so everyone has their own sort of technological background and their practices, which is a cultural practice, which is how things are done in that area. Even though the argument that each concept is only an expedient, Alright, let me get this aside. Paul Valerie's thesis is hyperbolic. There is still something, perhaps what Blumenberg calls absolute metaphor, which cannot be reduced to concept. The claim here is that we have to manage this something while we are thinking about algorithms. So each concept is only expedient. Okay, oh, that's a period there at the end. Okay, sorry, I missed the close parentheses. My fault. Algorithms and literature. The human being speaks of rationality, the place of concept, starting from irrationality and vice versa. This fact is shown by great literature, such as that of Shakespeare. Perhaps it is necessary to try to go beyond the rigid border between reason and unreason, or maybe to reason and unreason taking turns with both. Indeed, according to Donna, the tragedy of King Lear shows this issue from a philosophical point of view. Literature is maybe the place in which we could go beyond the border between reason and unreason. In this sense, it is useful when we talk about algorithms, as we'll see. Consequently, even if we are inside a heap of nature and culture, there is maybe a heuristic sense to imagining a sort of critical humanism or a sort of critical anthropocentrism. In this sense, we can at best aspire to a delusium becoming machine, but we can never speak as if we were machines, in the same way we can't speak as if we were animals, plants, or things. In other words, even if we let the animal, the plant, or the thing do the talking, we must still use our expressiveness, and in philosophy, we must use the concept. When we are talking about the other from us, even in philosophy, we inevitably end up using the literary register. If conceptual language is not enough to talk about something which is non-conceptual, for example, interpersonal life, animals, plants, things, then philosophy turns to literature, concept turns to metaphor. Why? I mean, the question of what is the difference between concept and metaphor seems to be somewhat important here. I mean, to me, I don't have much of a I don't make much of a distinction there, except people want concepts to, I guess, to be more important than mere metaphors. People say metaphors aren't what's really going on, it's just a mere metaphor. But usually everything's a metaphor. That was one of the things one of my teachers when I was an undergrad said, that his advisor when he was in grad school said, look, everything's a metaphor. Don't even, if you think you're wrong, it's just everything's a metaphor. Don't overdo it. So that was the upshot of that. And I think there's a lot of there's something to it, because people want to put more weight on things, on concepts that they like, and then the ones they don't like they just call mere metaphor, but that's just their bias. Alright, continuing. On the other hand, though I argue that while algorithm is in a culture machine, the human factor is deep inside the algorithm. Okay? According to Ed Finn, the datasets are mined by scoring systems. They define the parameters of data mining analyses. They create the clusters, links, and decision trees applied. They generate predictive models applied. Human biases and values are embedded into each and every step of development. Computerization may simply drive discrimination upstream. And this is I completely agree with this statement here. This is correct. Machine's imagination. In any case, one always remains in the field of human belief. We believe in the power of code as a set of magical symbols linking the invisible and visible, echoing our long cultural tradition of logos, or language as an underlying system of order and reason. Its power is a kind of sorcery. We believe in the elegant abstractions of cybernetics and ultimately computational universe, that algorithms embody and reproduce the mathematical substrate of reality in culturally readable ways. This I disagree with. I am much less of an optimist I'm much less of a rationalist than other people. I'm much more on the chaos side of things, so I don't think that it's magical or that interesting, and I don't think we're setting order to anything. So this is a very optimistic view, but I don't hold that one. But I understand it, at least. The consequence of this belief is mythopoiesis. This is what it means to say that an algorithm is a culture machine. It operates both within and beyond the reflexive barrier of effective computability, producing culture at a macro-social level at the same time as it produces culture objects, processes. So basically, if you take this sort of idealistic look at a language, that it actually is something that is rationalizing and has something, an underlying system of order and reason, that language as an underlying system of order and reason, which then when you start to turn it into a algorithm, something that can act on its own, that has an independent way of doing it, then the algorithm just can turn a computer into some sort of thing that just produces cultural objects and processes, because it's using the underlying system of order and reason on its own without us. Yeah. Maybe here the anthropological relevance of this belief is the central point. We are curious about algorithms, but we try to understand them in a human way. And of course, there is no possible machine learning for us. That's right, we do not machine learn. Although you might consider just sort of, what's that? You know, the classical conditioning, a kind of machine learning. Like we ring a bell, your mouth starts salivating because you know that means dinner time or whatever. And that's a sort of a kind of very, very algorithmic thing. Just a very, but anyway. But then classical conditioning is a metaphor in itself. So the author here has a point. The dizziness determined by our epistemological gap is also interesting. Aside from the most simplistic cases, we will never know how algorithms know what they know. This is the computational space of imagination, or what in Her, Samantha calls the space between the words. And once more shows the necessity of humanities. The author needs the language of art, needs the movie Her to imagine what the machine's imagination is. To imagine machine's imagination is not easy. I think this is precisely the problem of overcoming anthropocentrism. It is quite impossible to imagine what a plant or an object or a machine thinks. Okay. If conceptual language is not enough to talk about something which is non-conceptual, if conceptual language is not enough to talk about something which is not conceptual, then as I've said, philosophy turns to literature. See, for example, this animal, plants, things, algorithms. I don't know about that. Like, you can sort of... we sometimes think we understand what animals are thinking. We do. And, let me see if I can find it. Hold on one sec. Actually, no, I'll do it at the end. I'll come back to this. But if anyone's out there in chat, I haven't played this on the stream I don't think I ever played on stream. I've mentioned it a bunch of times. It's my favorite video. This is my favorite cat video on the internet, where you can understand what the cat is thinking by seeing what it does. And so there's a whole bunch of philosophy you could argue about this, and that's why I've brought it up a few times, and not recently, but I have brought it up a few times in the past, because you can see what the cat is thinking. You can. And so I feel like it's a counterexample to this sort of you can't understand what the cat is thinking sometimes. Well, sometimes I think you can. I mean, I'm not going with all animals, but sometimes an animal kind of like us, like a cat or a dog, maybe. From our human point of view, we can choose to construe the figure of the algorithm as a god to be worshipped, or we can choose to see a new player, collaborator, or interlocutor in our cultural games. In any case, we must answer the question about the kind of interlocutor, and somehow we are imagining the interlocutors all the time. And this is what I was saying also about the chess players above. They look at the algorithm's outputs, and they have to understand that in the human way. So the top chess players, they use this sort of algorithmic they do that. This is kind of what their job is at the moment, to both understand the person and the computer and then do something new with it. Okay, continuing. This is the main point. Even if we know that we are dealing with the cultural machines, we can't know what kind of metaphors, rhetoric, and figures of speech our biochemical algorithm has inside. In other words, whatever the nature of the algorithm we have inside, we must make an act of faith towards the cognitive rationality of the algorithm. This seems to me the anthropological issue of human complexity facing the algorithm. The fact that faith is always associated with the rationality is a consequence of this complexity which is guarded by literature and philosophy. Yeah, so in some sense, in interpreting ourselves, assuming there is some sort of underlying something, how do we just ascribe rationality to ourselves without actually knowing the exact process? That's a hard question. We don't know one can't know their own rationality. It's just one of those things that you can't know, because if you knew it, then you'd know how you were thinking and you'd know everything. And that'd be sort of like a universal set, and you'd get yourself in a paradox very quickly anyway. This complexity is also why I think it is useful to maintain, from a theoretical point of view, a minimal anthropocentrism. In a sense, anti-anthropocentrism wants from man a more than man can do, both in epistemological and ontological terms. It risks being, because of his Prometheism, paradoxically more than anthropocentric than anthropocentrism in itself. Yeah, I mean, it's a view from nowhere. If you're trying to get outside a person, it's a view from nowhere, not even God's eye view. It's not human, not nothing. And that's very difficult to argue for. So this is right. The suggestion is therefore to live critically in the mythology of the algorithm. We may need a mythology that includes mythos and logos. We need a mythology that contains in itself both belief, like Lear says, we'll think about the mysteries of the universe as if we were God's spies, and criticism. Romantic algorithmic lie and Romanesque truth. Furthermore, we must prevent computationalism from being a new conceptism. Paraphrasing Girard, we have to think about the links between romantic algorithmic lie and Romanesque truth. Speaking about the necessary kinship between philosophy and literature, it's useful to quote the novelist Ian McEwan in his recent book about robots, Machines Like Me. When the marriage of men and women to machines is complete, this literature will be redundant because we'll understand each other too well. Our narratives will no longer record endless misunderstanding. Our literature will lose their unwholesome nourishment. The lapidary haiku, the still clear perception of things as they are, will be the only necessary form. We could add that until the moment we will still use the literature to understand something about machines. Could add that until that moment we will still use the literature to understand something about machines. I would also add that until that moment we need humanities in general. We need McEwan, and Ed Finn needs movies to understand the other, which the machine is, beyond Plato's pili diaphora between philosophy and art, or beyond the idea that lies belong to romance. Algorithms and rhetoric. I agree, but I don't think we're ever going to get there. So, I don't think we're going to get to any this perfect marriage to men and women to machines. So, I think that's sort of a not what's going to happen. I have more faith in our irrationality than this author, I think. Algorithms and rhetoric. In any case, we use rhetoric all the time while we imagine the machines or the algorithms. For instance, Pedro Domingos, in another successful book, tries to imagine something which he calls master algorithm. Thanks to the master algorithms, all present, past, and future knowledge can be derived from a single universal learning algorithm. I decide to call it the master algorithm. Isn't this the choice of a rhetorical figure, the master algorithm, powerful and suggestive? As speaking about topoi and algorithms, the black box is a rhetorical figure. Is this just a Leibnizian monad, perhaps? Like something that you can abstract the entire universe from? I think that's closer to it. But yeah. Looking at these numerous and fascinating rhetorical figures, I start to think that we are in the age of myth of the algorithm. We live in the time of myth of the algorithm, and at the same time we have deep inside an algorithm of myth and metaphor, although we don't know where its pineal gland is, which is sort of a master biochemical algorithm, another metaphor indeed. Yeah, that kind of seems to be where this paper is going. Some sort of master mind connection between the universe and rationality. In this specific age, we may have specific problems. Thinking about law, the main question is probably the one of algorithmic legitimacy. We move from the community's legitimacy to the algorithm's legitimacy by breathing the ideology of Dataism. We need to underline that, as I've argued, such algorithm is a master of literature. Thinking about Asimov and McEwan, but also Shakespeare, our biochemical algorithms are in some way such stuff as literature is made of, because otherwise, from a legal point of view, the algorithm takes the positivistic place of the norm as a result. If we think back to the question at the beginning of the article, and reflect again on the sapiens as an interpreter, we may have to consider the algorithm as topos in lawyers' rhetoric and prevent Dataism from becoming a new kind of normativism. And I think this is one of the things that I was just discussing a few days ago in what happened in Great Britain, where they used an algorithm to predict high school student outcomes to then decide what their final grades would be, because they couldn't give final tests due to the pandemic. And so what happens is that it became a new normativism. The data that they had became normative to all the students. And the problem is, of course, the students don't fit the data. They are a different group of people. The normativism was the normativism of the past, containing all the past biases and the past, like everything of the past. And that's completely, basically it contains all the racism, the bias, the classism, and all the bad things there, and some of the good things, I'm sure. But it's completely unfair to the kids of today to normatively skew their grades based on somebody else's work. And that is kind of what happened. They put way too much faith in the data, and the kids of today suffered for it. And the only reason it got caught was because there was such a public outcry and they had to walk it back. Continuing. The question of the map. On the contrary, in this age of myth of the algorithm, we'll start to think that algorithms and data can describe the entire world like the empire's map. As Borges writes, in that empire, the art of cartography attained such perfection that the map of a single province occupied the entirety of a city, and the map of the empire an entirety of a province. In time, those unconscionable maps no longer satisfied, and the Cartographers' Guild struck a map of the empire whose size was that of the empire, and which coincided point for point with it. The following generations, who were not so fond of the study of cartography as their forebears had been, saw that the vast map was useless, and not without some pitilessness was it that they delivered it up to the inclemencies of the sun and winters. In the deserts of the West, still today there are tattered ruins of that map, inhabited by animals and beggars. In all the land there is no other relic of the disciplines of geography. The uselessness of this kind of map, which is underlined from Umberto Eco in a short essay on the impossibility of drawing a map of the empire on a scale of 1 to 1, is a possible risk of Dataism. For example, we take this risk about the COMPASS program. COMPASS, an acronym for Correctional Officer Management Profiling for Alternative Sanctions, is a case management and decision support tool developed and owned by Northpoint, now Equivent, used by U.S. court to assess the likelihood of a defendant becoming a recidivist. This is exactly the problem that happened in Great Britain, where they were using an algorithm to do future outcomes. Thinking to Dataism, we probably have to be careful and avoid considering this program as something that can describe everything in an objective way. The use of COMPASS is surely interesting, but we also have to think about the consequences of its use, and especially about the ideological consequences. Lawyers are often fascinated by the idea of an all-inclusive knowledge. According to this claim, we could say that the Napoleonic Code, ideologically speaking, was a sort of Borges map. Speaking about this ideological risk in other disciplines, we could mention DSM in psychiatry, and in human rights theories, even Nussbaum's list and capabilities. DeMarshall asks or says, normatism is of the error in data, bias, culture, and ethics. That's an interesting thought. Yeah. Speaking of DSM, I have one right here. This is my... Yeah, so DSM is an interesting whole project in itself. Keeping in mind the lawyer's fascination, we could also say something from the point of view of the general theory of law. If the crises of the sources of law is full-blown, maybe it is possible that the effectiveness takes the place of validity. In this sense, the emergence of techniques which can measure everything clearly gives a new strength to the concept of effectiveness. Yep, that's the psychology book. That defines mental psychiatric problems. So in some sense, if you define all the psychiatric issues, then you can somehow know everything about the mind. But of course, that's a little nuts. You can't know everything about the mind for the exact reasons we were discussing above, but there's the whole thing. Could you map the entire country 1-to-1? No. Could you map all of psychiatry? Of course not. That's not possible. But that's kind of the DSM in psychiatry. It talks about it defines the mental problems. Yeah. So I just thought it was funny to mention DSM. It's I didn't even have to take my headphones off. It's that close to me right here. Yeah. Because of this new strength, this is the theory of everything, could shift from the plane of having to be the plane of being. The problem arising, the one of Borges' map, is however the same and the one And one could say, with a slogan and a little joking, that the lawyers will move from Kelson to Compass. I think that the lawyer has to know that algorithms, data, and so on are rhetorical issues in the same way that norms are. As a result, the lawyer must recognize that there is still a role for pathos and ethos within the legal reasoning, and from another point of view, he must know that a difference still exists between reasonableness and reason in judges' work. The lawyer, according to this perspective, also needs to know that the very successful old idea of sources of law is a metaphor and is not an all-inclusive map. In conclusion, we could say that for the jurist, machine learning is important, but metaphoric learning is important as well. Okay, this is a fun paper. Yeah, this is again just the current danger of putting too much faith in, anything, any sort of like system of thought, whatever it might be, if it's the DSM in psychiatry or just the algorithm. If you put too much faith in something, like all the great science fiction writers have argued, it comes back to bite you in the butt. And this is exactly what is happening. You can't just assume that the algorithm and how it's made is somehow neutral. It is not neutral in the least, and this author is pointing out that algorithms and computers and computational knowledge it's sort of rife with metaphor, and the metaphors are clearly still not independent of us. They're all sort of anthropocentric metaphors. So that's how these things get made. That's how the data gets defined. That's how they're used in different ways. And so since the algorithm and computers are all rife with metaphor, we still have not gotten anywhere near outside of the humanistic thinking of things. And so for that reason, we have to be very careful to think, to abuse basically algorithmic thinking and dataism, as this person said. Now hold on one sec. I gotta go find my favorite cat video. I'm sorry. Cat video is like super important to me. So hold on one sec. If anyone has any questions, please let me know about the paper. No, stop. Do not play. But I'm gonna go find me my cat video. No, stop playing music. I told you not to play. I don't need this getting pulled down. I mean, YouTube has that autoplay. Here we go. This is the best cat video on the internet because it's super important. Alright, hold on one sec and I will get to cat video. Alright, here we go. This is like the most important thing on the internet in terms of philosophy.
Al bir şey. Kuş mesafeyi koruyor. Bak arkasını dönükken kuş. Kuş hazır ya. Kuş kalkacak ya.
Okay, and I don't know if everyone caught that. I'm going to play that one more time because I love that little video, but just watch. Again, we got a cat stalking a bird here.
Al bir şey. Kuş mesafeyi koruyor. Bak arkasını dönükken kuş. Kuş hazır ya. Kuş kalkacak ya.
And what's so important about this video is that all the people immediately recognized exactly what the cat was up to. There wasn't a question of, like, do we not understand what the cat is up to? The cat's not trying to fool us. And the fact that the cat flops over on its side in the most obviously, like, depressed way when the bird just, like, when the bird flies off, it confirms that we were right. It's not that the cat can tell us this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm going to do, but the obvious, like, just flop at the end of that shows you that that the cat was we all had the cat right. So, and you can see exactly what happened too. All the people were waiting. They were wanting to see what the cat would do. So it's like they were waiting, and when the cat flopped, they just started laughing because it was so obvious. So that's the thing. The idea that we can't understand animals and stuff, I'm not entirely sure. But the idea that, like, quite impossible to imagine what plant or an object or a machine thinks, well, no. Here's the problem. If the metaphors are so ingrained in ourselves and in our algorithms and all the other things, why do we assume that they aren't also in other stuff? Like, when our metaphors aren't so special that, like, we shouldn't just be so wedded to the anthropocentric view that our metaphors are only ours. They could be other places too. And so the idea is that, look, that's the whole point. The metaphors are pervading other things. They may exist other places, not just us. And so we should be able to understand something of animals, plants, and things and algorithms. So I kind of don't agree with this author's this sort of this bit over here. To imagine machines' imagination is not easy. Yeah, I agree with that, but that doesn't mean that the metaphors that we use are really just our own. Okay, so that was what I wanted to bring up, and I think that video is just, it has a lot of good things, and it philosophically important cat video. So I like, I'll post that in the show notes if anyone's watching later. Okay, so if there's any other questions, please let me know now. Otherwise, I'm done with this. Okay, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you later.